I am so honored to be here, and I have to just say thank you to my friend Keela Hall for putting this together, both of you. It is really incredible, right? I'll tell you, when I met Keela, I felt like the entire energy of the universe was circulating around me. Have you all had that feeling? Irrepressible energy, and I know what it takes to put on conferences like this, and I think it is an amazing opportunity for us to see and hear from women in so many different professions, bringing our power collectively to the room. So thank you both so much for putting this on. Keela, it's been wonderful getting to know you over the past few months. So I like to say that when you have a collection of powerful women in the room, we have something called the W factor. And the W factor is the collective power of women to advance the common good. And by that, I mean the increasingly measurable and positive impact that women's rising power has economically, socially, and politically on the protection and the promotion of all of us in this country. And I want to say, because I see a good few men here in the room, that when we talk about women's power, we are not talking about women's power that comes at the expense of men. We are actually talking about a power that is a unifying force in America and that stands to benefit both men and women. So let's give it up for the good men that are in the room today. And the reality is that as women, we have to define our power in new ways and not be afraid to step into that power. And I have to say, for me, that means that we have to be willing to lead with abundance and generosity and deeply rooted in love, which I think is something that women do very well. And we have to bring our whole selves, as our sister Nicole said earlier. We've got to bring our whole selves to the table. And I think that the research shows that women really are uniquely positioned to lead in very different ways and with very different positive outcomes. And so that is part of what we are all doing today, is building that collective power that research shows, by the way, that when women are in decision-making positions in whatever field, we make decisions that are better for women and for families, for our children. And certainly in the marketplace, we know that the economic power of women is pretty stunning. Women now represent 57% of the workforce. Our participation in the American economy has increased by 53% in the past 50 years. And by the way, that is a trend led by women of color. Let's give it up for the women of color in the room. It is not significantly recognized, and 4 in 10 women in the United States today are the primary breadwinners in their homes. And women's overall contribution to GDP now amounts to about $1.7 trillion. $1.7 trillion. But it's not just about economics. It's also about our social capital. And if you think about our social scientists, women make up 63% of social scientists, 56% of college students, and 1/3 of all the doctors and lawyers. We are the majority of nurses, of elementary and middle school teachers, and the primary caretakers of both children and the elderly, who, by the way, are also disproportionately female. But while we're on the rise, we are on the rise, that means we're not at the top yet. Means we still have a lot of work to do and a long way to go to hit that mountaintop. And so gender bias here in Washington is alive and well. We are still paid about 78 cents on the dollar to men, which is a loss, by the way, of about $400,000 over a 40-year period for each of these women. And if you go down into women of color statistics, what you see is even more. Latina women earn only 56 cents on the dollar. And while in Washington State, we do have 2 women senators, and we used to lead the country in women in the legislature, we are not in that place anymore. We've actually taken some steps backwards. And in Congress, only 1 in 5 people in Congress are women. So we have a lot to do, and we also have to redefine what it is that we care about, because often when you hear about women's issues, what you hear about is our reproductive organs, which I love our reproductive organs. I don't know about you, but they're pretty fabulous. We should be able to continue to make choices around our own bodies. They are ours, and we should be able to determine the future of those beautiful organs. But that is not the only thing that we are concerned with. We care about childcare. We care about small businesses. We care about jobs. We care about minimum wage. We care about foreign policy. And we need to make sure that our interests are being represented everywhere, because in particular, we have a very intersectional lens. I like to say that I am not a woman on Monday, a person of color on Tuesday, a mom on Wednesday, and a worker on Thursday. I am all of those things all of the time. And all of them matter to me. And so I will just share a little bit about my story, because I'm an organizer, and I actually believe that the best thing we can do is share our stories with each other and tell each other who we are and how we got to where we are, so that we can understand how we're connected. So I'm an immigrant from India. I came to the United States when I was 16 years old by myself. My parents had about $5,000 in their bank account, and they used the whole thing to send me here by myself, because they felt like this was a place I was going to get the best education and have the brightest future. And I did not understand the extent of that sacrifice until my son turned 16. And then I thought about what that meant, to send your kid across the ocean, know that they might never come back. And because of our broken immigration system, I've never been able to bring my parents here. So they are getting older in India, and I am getting older here, younger here. And we are separated by oceans, but connected right here in terms of the sacrifice and the opportunity. And that is why I've spent the last 25 years of my life fighting for other people to have opportunity. And it took a while for me to get there, because my dad wanted me to be the CEO of IBM. I was supposed to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a business person. Those are the three options for the Indian father who takes his entire savings and sends his daughter to the United States. So you can imagine my sophomore year of college. I went to Georgetown University. We had enough money for one phone call home a year. And my sophomore year of college, I used my one phone call to call my dad and tell him that instead of being an economics major, I was going to be an English literature major. And then I had to hold the phone away from my ear like this as he screamed at me and said, "I did not send you to the United States to learn how to speak English. You already know how to speak English." But he was concerned about my financial stability, and so I did. I went and worked on Wall Street. I got a master's in business. I went after that to work for a medical equipment company. I was the only woman and the only person of color they had ever seen in Western Ohio and Eastern Indiana. But I found that I had a lot in common with people, not just politically. We were very, very different, let me tell you, but we connected on a human level around our values and what we wanted for our futures, and that has prepared me actually really well. And I finally left and went to the public sector and the nonprofit sector, because I realized that for me, and this is our sister Nicole's message about bringing your full self to the table, I needed my vocation and my avocation, the work that I did and the things that I loved to do, to be the same. And that was a moment of reckoning for me to say, yes, I am going to just do the things that I know are going to make me feel like I have a place in this world and like I can bring myself fully. And so that meant working for International Health First, for expanding access to women and families and healthcare around the world. But then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, I realized that so much of what I stood for was at stake. And when people were being discriminated against and civil liberties abuses being levied against people just because of the way they looked, just because they were Muslim, that was not something I could sit by and tolerate. And so I started what was then called Hate Free Zone. It would be 15 years on Tuesday. What was then called Hate Free Zone, which turned into the largest immigrant advocacy organization in the state. Is so proud to lead it for 12 years. And we actually sued the Bush administration successfully around illegal deportations. We organized tens of thousands of people across the state for immigrant rights and for immigration reform, to bring 12 million undocumented immigrants out of the shadows, to make sure that we were actually providing the opportunity for our communities to really bring their whole selves to the table, and to fight against police brutality, for racial equity, to work with good law enforcement people who are ready to change the cultures within law enforcement, and to make sure that every single day we are thinking about how we make this country as great as we know it can be. And so that is the work that I've done for so long, and I never thought I was gonna run for public office. I'm kind of on the outside, making change from the outside, but then I started looking around, and I realized that after 20 years of trying to get people to do the things that we want them to do, why not go in there and try to do it ourselves? Why do we cede that political ground so that we can make sure, why don't we go in there and actually say, we're gonna try to make a difference? And so in 2014, I ran for the state Senate. I represent the 37th legislative district, which is the most ethnically and racially diverse district in the state. Give it up for the 37th, and I'm really proud of the work that I have been able to do in the state Senate. I'm the only woman of color there. So first we're gonna cheer for that, because that's a good thing. We've got one. It's good. And then we're gonna have a little bit of a boo for the fact that we only have one, right? We really need to make sure we are building that leadership pipeline. And in the state legislature, I'm so proud to have worked with Republicans across the aisle to make sure that we're investing in pre-apprenticeship programs for women and people of color to get jobs in the transportation sector. Amazing work, and I just went to the kickoff of one of the programs. A couple from the Congo, people from Myanmar and Somalia, African-American women in the trades, actually learning that trade so they can earn $25 the minute they get out of those pre-apprenticeship programs. Passing the first ever law that makes us the first state in the country to test all of our untested rape kits. Can you imagine? We have 6,000 rape kits that have been untested. And that is just not right. So we are gonna change that, making sure that we expand access to the most effective contraceptives for low-income women on Medicaid. Because when I got in there, I found out that if you were poor and on Medicaid, you actually didn't get reimbursed at the same rates as everybody that wasn't on Medicaid. And so that meant you didn't have access to those contraceptives because you couldn't afford them. So we changed that. Millions of women are now going to have access to those long-acting reversible contraceptives. So I've learned that when we get in there, whether we're white, black, or brown, whether we come from law enforcement or community service, whatever our instincts are, we are representing a different perspective from the community. And that is a really beautiful thing. But also what I've learned is that we can use elected office to organize and to bring more people in. It is not enough to just be a vote on a piece of legislation. We have to reconnect our communities to our government. And so I'm really proud to be running for the United States Congress in the 7th Congressional District, which is right here, it includes this area. And through that campaign, we have gotten 1,000 people involved in the campaign, 1,000 volunteers. We knocked on 70,000 doors. We made 140,000 phone calls. We have every color of the rainbow represented, young people, people of color, older people, people who have never participated in the democratic process because they didn't believe that government mattered. But there are two ways to suppress the vote. One is through restrictive voter ID laws and gerrymandering of districts. But the other is if we stop to believe that we can make a difference. If we stop to believe, if we start to think that our voices don't matter and that nobody's listening and that government isn't responsive and so we don't need to say anything, then we're suppressing the vote. So it's up to us to make sure that we are getting out there, talking to people, connecting people to government, and that's what I hope to do in Congress, is be a bold progressive voice for women, for people of color, for the middle class, for people who feel like their lives have been rigged and they can't put food on the table or afford a home anymore. We need to make sure we're actually bringing everybody into our economy. So to me, that is really important. And I want to end by saying that they say that women need to be asked 7 times to run for office. So, if you have never thought about running for office before, let me say that consider this the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh time that you are being asked, so that the next time you start thinking about it, or somebody asks you if you want to run for office, that instead of saying, I'm not sure I'm qualified, I don't know if I have enough experience, I don't know, it seems kind of scary. Do you really think I can do a good job? Those are the things that we say as women. I have said them myself. And I will tell you that what we need to say is, thank you for the invitation. I think I have a lot to bring to the table. And I can't wait to get in and run for office. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day today. And I hope you have women on the rise, not just today, but into the future. Thank you.